All right, I think it's 6:30. I don't have my clock, so all right. So today, if anybody's ever had one of them moments where you like try to prepare and sometimes you maybe over prepare and then you get yourself all confused, even more. So this was always one of the places where I struggled before. Seeing exactly what's going on here. I think I've got the gist of it pretty good, but if you try to like timeline this stuff out and when all this is going to occur, it would take a whole lot of studying to do. But before I get started, John had brought in two of the David Jeremiah books. They're sitting right there on that first table, and he said if anybody wants to take them home and read them, you're welcome to them. He's got the newest one, and then I think the one right before it. Yeah. So the Book of Signs, and then his latest ones. So he said, feel free to take them home and read them. So I wanted to tell you that. So today we'll be in chapter 17 and 18, and so I put on the board at the bottom left there. That these kind of pause time again. Okay, we're not going in chronological order again. This is where it kind of stops, and it's going to give us details of the Babylon, the what's going to be the new Babylon, and also its destruction. So we're going to get a little more detail because we've kind of already learned about its destruction. So now John here's getting the visions of, hey, this is what it's like. So to help understand this, there's either, you can call it two different Babylons or two different parts of Babylon, I think is better. You got the religious part of Babylon, okay, and then you're going to have the political part of Babylon. I feel like this ain't even on.
It's not on.
You weren't supposed to. Everybody said it was on.
I can hear the static. We can hear it back there.
I got more buttons
You
here.
just need to be closer.
Maybe you just needed to talk into it, because it's on.
It's on. You just need to be closer.
Is that better?
Yeah, I can hear it. We heard you in there when you asked.
Yeah.
When you came out here, we didn't hear.
Oh, hey, I've been turning the wrong button. There we go.
I can hear now.
How's that?
That's loud.
Phew. This is why they don't hire me to be in that room.
Just stick with your camera.
I can barely work a phone right here. Yep, there's something called music flats and microphone flats. And I was doing the music and not the microphone. Okay, so is that better?
Yeah.
All right. So there's two. If I need a refresh, John's got two books there. Feel free to grab them. And there's going to be two different types of Babylons. We got the religious part of Babylon, okay, and then the political part of Babylon. The religious part is going to help bring peace and unity. We talk about that false peace. We've talked about it quite a bit. And that's what the religious part is going to be happening. You got to think at this time, there's a whole lot of people ain't going to know what's going on after the rapture happens. So the religious part is there to help bring peace. And then you got the political part, or you can call it political, military, whatever you want to call it. It will eventually take over, and then there's only going to be the religious part. Okay, the political part's going to take over, destroy the religious part, and then after that, it's only going to be worship of the Antichrist. So the Antichrist, like I've said during this when we talk about this false prophet and all that, it's not going to be just some crazy religion. Okay, it's going to have like Christianity embedded in it, and then like afterwards, I'm pretty sure David Jeremiah alludes to who he thinks like this false prophet and what this false religion is going to be. But Antichrist is going to use it, bring peace, and then the Antichrist is going to basically destroy the religion part of it and be like, okay, now there's only worship of me. So that's all what we're going to talk about today. So chapter 17 and 18, like I said, they kind of pause time. We get more details of what we've kind of already learned. And, all right, not me. Let's see. So kind of keep in mind, here's how Rick kind of opened it, but when we were created to, hey, I can't even read the difference between music and mic. It starts with an M, so I get it. But we were created to worship, okay? When God created us, He wanted us to worship. And we all, like whether you're believers or unbelievers, you're all going to worship something. It just depends on what you're going to worship. So Satan, God intended us probably to worship him or use things to worship him. Take like music, for example. There's a lot of songs, we read about songs that they've been singing in heaven during this time. Old Testament is full of songs and hymnals. Psalms, the book, it's all kinds of songs. But so Satan will use what God intended to worship God, and Satan will come in and try to twist things up. Music's a real good example. Look how many satanic music things are out there nowadays. So Satan will get in to the worship area, and then Satan's gonna wind up trying to get into the church. He's gonna get the wrong people into the pulpits. He's going to get these people to start teaching false doctrine, false religion. He's going to use, massive YouTube followers. Use them guys. I don't understand it, but apparently random people have million YouTube followers. Well, who knows what them guys are talking about? So all this stuff Satan is going to get in. They're going to start talking about sin. They're going to promote grace abuse. Sin all you want. You know what I mean? It don't matter. All kinds of just false stuff out there, okay? Satan's going to get in it all. Because Satan uses deception, and deception. It's what he does. And so here's a quote, if I copied it down right. So Rick Burgess actually says this: "We cannot afford to continue to be lazy with our studying, applying, and knowing the Word of God. If this is not at the center of our life, and you're going to continue to casually be biblically illiterate, not just you will pay the price, but everybody connected to you will pay the price." And I thought that was really good. We need to be putting it front and center. And I've talked about many a times how I'm just basically now learning, to study scripture like I should have been doing for 40 years of my life. But I'm just now doing what I should have been doing. Because we can be easily led astray. When Satan was in the garden, all he did was misconstrue God's words. And that's why we're at nowadays. Okay, so chapter 17. This is going to get into the spiritual nature of the Antichrist kingdom. Okay, it's going to be revealed here. And then 18, we'll get into the political system of the Antichrist. And then, like I said, it pauses time. We get a deeper look into some of the details. And don't forget, this has been destroyed. We're just going to learn more about how it was and how it come about. But in chapter 14, verse 8, and chapter 16, verse 19, talks about the destruction of Babylon, the Antichrist kingdom. We're just going to now get some more detail. So during the tribulation, people will be seeking a religion, okay? Because it's bad times. When people are raptured, the little kids are all gone, everybody's going to be like, oh my goodness, what's going on? So the false prophet is going to be in there and basically help the Antichrist be like, oh, look at this guy, he's so great, this is going to be the new savior of the world and all that. So that's how it's going to kind of get going. All right, so we'll get into verse 1. It says, "One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls," that was in chapter 16, "came and said to me, 'Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters.'" Okay, so great prostitute, and if anybody's got the King James Version in there, it actually just says whore. Okay, if anybody's ever heard of the whore of the church, this is exactly what it's talking about. Different translations call it different things, but great prostitute, you got the idea. Okay, so when we read this in here, this prostitute, this is talking about the false religion. This is Satan's spiritually adulterous system. And then when it said there, she is seated on many waters. Okay, that's meaning it's universal. It's everywhere. It's going to be during this time the official world religion. Okay, people, many people will be led astray because of this. So verse 2, with her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries. So not only the leaders of the earth, but all mankind will be absorbed into this false religion. And when it says there it's adulteries, it's not meaning just sexual immorality. It's talking about all idols. Okay, whether we're going to read about how rich Babylon got. Okay, it's wealth. I mean, it's going to be all of it, from money to sex to greed, pride, all of it. It's all going to be under here. And this is a good point too. So if you want to grow a church, okay, preach a message where redemption doesn't cost anybody anything. And that your church will grow then. But if you start telling people that, hey, you know, Christ doesn't ever say in the Bible, pick up your cross, follow me, but go ahead and keep doing everything you were doing before. Or like when he heals people, he always says, go sin no more. He doesn't say, hey, keep on doing all the bad stuff you were. But people don't want to hear that. So if you, they don't want to hear that part. So in this time, imagine the church coming up there saying like, hey, this redemption stuff, it's easy. Okay, it's not going to cost you anything. I mean, it's going to boom. People are going to fall right into the trap. Verse 3. Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. There I saw a woman sitting on the scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names, and had 7 heads and 10 horns. All right, so the woman, okay, that's the same as the great prostitutes, what it's talking about. This is the false religion part of Babylon. And it says the scarlet beast. So scarlet, you can probably gather that as meaning royalty, splendor, okay, dressed up real nice. But beast, this is the Antichrist that it's talking about. So it's riding in on the Antichrist. And who, for a time, now I'll point that out again because it gets kind of confusing. For a time, the Antichrist will support and use this false religion to bring unity to the masses, okay? But it's only for a time. Then there it talks about the blasphemous names. So any false church is going to give their own version of God that is not one of his pre-approved names. I mean, you read scriptures, you got Yahweh. I can't think of all, but you know what I mean. There's been all kinds of names that God has given himself, especially Jesus, the Son of Man, you know, the Lion and the Lamb and all that. This lady is not going to be talking about any of that. Okay, and then the last part of that verse, it says the 7 heads and 10 horns. This is going to be the political alliances of the Antichrist, and we'll actually learn a little more about them coming up. All right, so verse 4, the woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. I'll do 5 too. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and the abominations of the earth. Okay, so therefore, the woman is portrayed as a prostitute that has, basically been really good at her job. Okay, she has become extremely wealthy. She's got precious stones. She's glittered with gold. She's got the purple and the scarlet. So she's been good at what she's come to do. Has become really wealthy. And basically, when it says the second half of 4, it says she held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. So sin comes covered in an attractive veneer. Okay, it looks really, really good on the surface, and it hides its evil and its hideous consequences. So sin always matters. That's one thing that we talk about quite a bit in our men's group. But sin always matters, but it looks really good on the surface. But deep down, it costs. And then there in verse 5, the title written on her forehead. So apparently in the Roman times at this time, prostitutes had to be labeled. So this was nothing. I mean, John knew exactly what he was talking about there. So they had to be labeled somehow. And this kind of goes all the way back to, for those that know, and probably everybody in here does, but the Tower of Babel, all the way back in Genesis 11. That's where Babylon goes back to. And then the ancient city of Babylon, that was back in Daniel's time. The Old Testament Babylon, okay, and this is here what we're reading is about the New Babylon, but the Old Testament Babylon was always synonymous with idolatry, pride, and always rebellion against God. But it first started with the Tower of Babel there in Genesis, and then it, like I said, the New Babylon, or the Old Testament Babylon then was in Daniel, and you can go read all kinds of stuff about it. But the pride, that's one of those big ones that people don't look at. I mean, we see people that are prideful all the time, but we don't really realize how serious that sin is. But I mean, that was the sin of Satan. He was so prideful. He wanted to be God, and it's one that I think should be talked about a little bit more. But it said there at the beginning of her title, mystery. So a lot of what I was reading, so the precise detail of how all this will be manifested into the world, okay, we it's not really known yet how this is all exactly going to work. And that's kind of what I said about timing. Okay, we know the false prophet's coming, the Antichrist is coming, and eventually the Antichrist is going to turn on this false religion. But when and how and all this gets going, all the details are not yet known. All right, so verse 6, it says, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. So this false church, this false religion is a murderer. I mean, pretty much. Now, whether if it's directly killing believers, because remember, during the tribulation, there will be people that come to faith, and they'll be martyred. If they can be caught, they're going to be martyred. So this church is directly involved, but then also, I mean, if this church is leading people astray, I mean, that's murder, just in kind of a different degree. But if you lead people the wrong way, it's still a murderous system. And this final false system is going to be the deadliest of any false church that we've had to this day. Picture it, and I think this sums it up really good. This false religion, false church. It's a beautiful woman with a deadly intent, and like I said, she'll be covered head and toes, looking beautiful to the eye, to the surface, because that sin always looks good, but deep down, it's got a bad intent to it. The second half of 6 there, it says, when I saw her, I was greatly astonished. And then verse 7, then the angel said to me, why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast, which the Antichrist, which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life, better be making sure names are written in that book, from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because, and here's a good point, he once was, now is not, and yet will come. So I know verse 8 is pretty long there. It's probably one of the longest verses. But if you think of Christ, he always said he was, he is, and he is to come, okay? The Antichrist here says he once was, now is not, and yet will come. So what is that kind of meaning? So his now is not, and yet will come, the last 2 parts of it. Remember, he's got that fatal wound. Okay, so he's got that I'm going to use fake death because that seems to be where a lot of the commentaries go. Like they don't think God gave Satan the power for resurrection, but maybe he did. But that fake wound, that fake death and resurrection that we learned about back in chapter 13, where the Antichrist is going to die, but then be resurrected, and the false prophet is there doing it with him. And that's why it says, now is not, so he died, okay? And then it says, yet will come, so he comes back. And that fake death and resurrection actually comes back up again later in what we're going to study today. And that's why it's so close. You know, he once was, now is not, and yet will come. Close but opposite of the Christ. You know, he was, he is, and he is to come. And that's Satan always trying to mimic exactly what they're doing, what God is doing with his holy Trinity. Satan is trying to do it with his unholy Trinity. All right, so verse 9, it says, this calls for a mind of wisdom. And that is so important right there, the wisdom. We can't have the wisdom unless we have the knowledge of really what's going on. Then it says, the 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. Okay, these 7 hills, 2 different kinds of things that I've read. They likely symbolize the 7 kingdoms and kings that we're going to read about in verse 10. Okay. Also, Rome is known as a city built on 7 hills. Okay, so a lot of people think, like I've told you before, there's going to be, if not the whole Roman Empire, there's going to be at least bits and pieces of the Roman Empire be reconstructed during all this tribulation stuff. But some believe that this means that the Antichrist will emerge somewhere within that Roman Empire. Okay, and I think Rome plays kind of a big key in what goes on at this time. All right, so now we'll get into verse 10 and talk about the 7 kings. They are also, because it says, so the 7 heads are 7 hills, and it says in verse 10, they are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. But when he does come, he must remain for a little while. All right, so let's break these apart, these 7 kings. 5 fallen, okay? 5 fallen Gentile empires, starting with Egypt, Assyria, the Old Testament Babylon, Medo-Persia, and then the Greeks, okay? All these were fallen when Revelation was wrote. Okay, and then the 1 is, that's the Roman Empire that was going on at the time when John was getting all this. And then it says the other yet to come. That's going to be the Antichrist's empire, the new Babylon. Okay, but it's only going to be here for a little while. All right, now this will get a little more confusing here in verse 11. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. So if you're reading this, you're like, oh my goodness, well, if he was 7, how can he be 8? Okay. That goes back, because it said when the 7th one, it says the other yet to come in verse 10, that was Antichrist's empire, the new Babylon, and it said for a little while. Because why? He had his fake death. Okay, he died and then got fake resurrected. So then now he's the 8th king. He was the 7th king, and now he's the 8th king during this time. Does everybody kind of get that? You know, we had the 5 that was passed away before Revelation was even wrote, and then the 1 is, so that makes 6. That's Rome, because that's going on at the time. And the 1 yet to come is the Antichrist's empire, and then that he dies, fake dies. And then he gets re-erected, so now he's the 8th king. He was the 7th and then the 8th king. I think I got all that kind of halfway correct. Now, like I said, there are other theories on this, but this is what I ran across the most. So, verse 11, no, I did all that. So he belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. meaning that, I mean, eventually Jesus is coming back to destroy him. So verse 12, the 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. The way I take these 10 kings is that they're sub-rulers, okay, under the Antichrist's kingdom. He's got his 7 big ones, but then under them, he's got these sub-rulers, kind of like districts, 10 districts in his nation, so to say. And then they're only gaining power, it says, for 1 hour. And then way I've read that you don't have to take this 1 hour literally, it's just meaning short period of time. But they get their power, and they will receive authority as kings along with the beast, okay? And then we'll go into 13. They have one purpose, these 10 kings. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. So they're basically getting ready to come to their battle, and then obviously they're going to be destroyed. They're getting ready for Armageddon, and then, like I said, chapter 16 verses 14 and 16, we learned about the battle of Armageddon, but we actually won't get more details of it until chapter 19. And that's the hardest part here with Revelations, when it goes back and forth. That's why I have to make notes on all this stuff. So I have some of this stuff, like especially the back in time things, like I have it on my notes, and I wrote it like in my Bible. So if I go back and look, oh, chapter 17, wait, that kind of paused time. So that means this stuff already kind of happened, and it's just, you got to go back and check it out. All right, so let's do 15, and then we'll pause for a second and get into 16. Then the angel said to me, the waters you saw where the prostitute sits, remember that was at the very beginning, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. And that's another thing. Sometimes in Scripture, you don't actually get the details of what you're reading for several verses later, but eventually some of it's kind of explained. So like I said, the water that this false religion is sitting on, I mean, it's worldwide. It's everywhere. It's universal. All right, so here we go in 16. We're going to learn about the destruction of the false church, the false religion, the religion part of Babylon. We're going to learn about its destruction right here in verse 16. Now, this is not I remember when I went through it the first time, I thought that was meaning the false prophet actually was killed during this. But it's not, because he's not, because Jesus will actually put him into hell later. So he can't be killed now, because we'll learn later that Jesus will actually put him into hell. So this is just the false religion system is getting destroyed right here, okay? So verse 16, it says, the beast and the 10 horns, so that was them 10 sub-rulers, you saw will hate the prostitute. Now remember, everybody was loving the prostitute at first, but now they're turning on her. Okay, so they will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So a complete 360 on this false religion. After using this false church to unify the world and gain control, the Antichrist, with the help of his 10 sub-rulers, will turn against it, destroy it, seize. Remember, this prostitute was getting rich. She was good at her job. She's getting rich, so they're going to seize all this wealth, all the power that it had, and it will turn into only worship of the Antichrist will be allowed. Or I'd put in Satan as well, because I mean they're one of the same. And the theory on all this, and this is why it's so hard to timeline this out, that when, say, this verse 16 happens, is going to be around mid-trib, when the false religion part is taken out, when the Antichrist turns on it. Now, where that is, if you look at my fancy dancy timeline, we have two red lines. It could happen after the first seal, after the fourth seal. We don't really know. You can go on YouTube and try not to fall in one of those. Try not to fall in one of those, false prophet traps on YouTube and and search it. But somewhere people are thinking this will happen around the mid tribulation. All right, so verse 17. It says, "For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish this purpose by agreeing to give the beast the power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." So verses 17 right there, it's basically saying God's in control of it all. He's using all these people for a pawn, and nothing will happen until his words are completely fulfilled, and it will happen exactly the way he says and the way he wants it, which should be comforting. All right, so now chapter 18, we'll get into basically the political version of Babylon, and then Babylon's complete fall. Okay, we got the religious part fall, but now we're going to learn about its destruction, like physically. Okay, the actual city, the political, the merchandise part of Babylon. So destruction and commerce Babylon, along with its political, social, whatever you kind of want to call it, is going to be the focus here in 18. Some have labeled this chapter the funeral for humanity for this time. So I thought that kind of went along pretty good. So verses 1 to 3, we'll do the first 3, and then we'll kind of go back to it. It's going to basically, God, right here in verses 1 to 3, God's going to announce what's to come. It says, "After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven." And I'll stop there for just a second, because some people say, like this word angel, they think it's Jesus, but this is that word. I think it's angelos. It's meaning another of the same kind. During no way that Jesus would have been just labeled another of the same kind. So I would call it just another mighty angel, like it says. But then it goes on. He says, "He had great authority," this angel, "and the earth was illuminated by his splendor." Illuminated. If you, can think back to last week, the fifth bowl, okay, which is in chapter 16, it plunged the whole world into darkness. But now it's being illuminated, okay, by this angel. That's why this angel is powerful. It's wanting to just show John exactly the details of what has happened. And that was chapter 16, verse 10, where the fifth bowl plunged the world into darkness. So verse 2, it says, "With a mighty voice he shouted, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a home for demons and a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird.'" Verse 3, "For all the nations have drunk her maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of her earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries." So basically, everybody at this time, they're loving the city. Okay, this Babylon is so great. There's every sinful desire you can think of in there. There's wealth, especially after they take over the false church. They got even more wealthy. Merchants are in and out. We're going to hear about the sailors and kings. Rulers are going to love it. I know why. This is why a lot of people, when you look things up, that a lot of people think this could be the United States, because we're one of the wealthiest countries, except we're in debt to everybody, but that's a different story. But still, God is not worried about the United States. It's going to be happening over there. But just so you know, everybody's in love with this city, and we're going to find out two different feelings about the destruction. But right there, I want to point out in verse 2, because it's kind of neat. It says a haunt for every unclean, and a haunt just meaning a place. I know everybody's translation is going to be a little different, but a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. Okay, so most detestable birds are going to be your like vultures and stuff eating on the dead. Okay, and why does John put that in here, or why did the angel have John put that in here? Because you're going to need the vultures to clean up all the dead the dead beings laying around. And when we hear about the details of Armageddon in chapter 19, there's one part of it that's actually pretty neat. They call in the birds before it even happens. And then verse 3, therefore all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. This is like a materialistic stupor. Political rulers and corporate leaders alike are all going to be swept into this worldwide system of commerce. And you got to remember, if we got a one world government, this is kind of going to be its headquarters. All trade, the war machines, all that it's all going. This is going to be the headquarters for it all. All right, so verses 4 and 5, it's going to talk about avoiding this judgment to come, because we're going to hear about the judgment, but we've also already seen the judgment already happen. All right, so verse 4, then I heard another voice from heaven say, come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues, for her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. So this message right here in verse 4 and 5, this message is not only for them, but it's for now too. We got the same stuff going on. You can be like, oh, these people, they're dumb on the tribulation if they don't turn. We got the same options now, and there's still people not turning to Christ. So it's not just for them, it's also for us. Then I have a little side note, Romans 12:2. Romans 12:2 fits right along with this. It says, do not conform any longer to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is.